our political life. Representative Wasserman Schultz, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for allowing me and asking me to come down this evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murphy, and thank you for your leadership as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee as well, and your commitment and support to a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, also an important issue to those of us in the Jewish community, and important to Americans, as Israel is our strongest ally and friend. You're right, and the reason that I wanted you to come down tonight is because growing up as a nice Jewish girl on Long Island, I knew a few folks over your way in Connecticut, being a resident of the tri-state area, and knowing the rich tradition of political activism and involvement of Jewish leaders in Connecticut, and your leadership as we'll call you an honorary Jew tonight, Murphyburg or something like that. But thank you so much for your leadership on behalf of your constituents and your state, and thank you for joining me this evening to honor the contributions of American Jews to the fabric and the tapestry of American life. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to wrap up here in a few moments. I want to share a few other things to help tie a ribbon on the second to last day of Jewish American Heritage Month. We'll wrap up tomorrow. I want to share a story of a Floridian because oftentimes, certainly recently, Florida would be well known for our significant, sizable, and accomplished Jewish community, particularly in South Florida, where my district is. I like to say that I'm the person that represents paradise down our way in South Florida, but the paradise that we see today in South Florida was mostly swampland many years ago, and so the pioneers that blazed the trail that allowed for the vibrant communities that we have in our state really were just that. They were pioneers, and I want to share a story of one of those pioneers. For example, Moses Elias Levy, who lived from 1782 to 1854. He was one of the earliest and largest developers in the state of Florida. At his Pilgrimage Plantation, which was the first Jewish communitarian settlement in our country, Moses housed several German Jewish families while reintroducing sugarcane to our state. Thanks to his cultivation of the first sugarcane plantation in Alachua County, which is also has the good fortune of being the home county to the University of Florida, my alma mater. Go Gators. So Florida boasts a thriving sugar production market today, and that can be traced directly to Moses Elias Levy. As a civil rights activist, though, that's the contribution that I want to highlight. And America's first Jewish abolitionist author, Levy exemplified not only the American entrepreneurial spirit, but the Jewish value that we've been talking here this evening about of tikkun olam, repairing the world. He was an early and ardent advocate for public education for both boys and girls, and that was also not common back then. Education was typically more often left for boys, and girls were kind of lucky if they had someone in their lives that encouraged them to get an education and to continue it for any length of time. And so I'm proud to remember Moses Elias Levy's early contributions and dedication to education and gender equality. And interestingly enough, Levy County today is named after this gentleman, as well as David Yulee Levy, who was our first United States Senator in the state of Florida and who was also an American Jew. The other thing I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, is it is also not often that Americans are aware of Jewish contributions to our military history. And there is a way that people can get educated about American Jewish contributions to the military history throughout our history of involvement militarily by going and visiting the National Museum of American Jewish Military History, which is in our nation's capital on DuPont Circle. I had an opportunity to host a Jewish American Heritage Month event there a few years ago, and was really thrilled to learn about the contributions all the way back, Mr. Speaker, to the Revolutionary War. Jews were not only a part of fighting the Revolutionary War and fighting for freedom in the United States, but also financing and making sure Chaim Solomon was an important figure in ensuring that we had the resources, and that the Minutemen had the resources under George Washington's leadership to ultimately be able to make sure that we have a country and that we are the beacon of freedom across the world that we are today. That was in no small measure thanks to the contributions of Jews who were pioneers here in America. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to share some of the really unique and wonderful events that have happened throughout Jewish American Heritage Month and that we will continue to foster and thrive and encourage both Jews and non-Jews to celebrate these rich traditions. Earlier this month, right at the beginning, on May 2nd, there was a focus in a program on religion and politics called When General Grant Expelled the Jews, because it's so important, and Jewish community leaders talk so often, and religious leaders talk so often about the importance of not forgetting about previous persecution so that we can make sure that history doesn't repeat it. And having an opportunity at the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia to hold that lecture so that we are familiar with that history was important. There was also a program in Miami Beach, Coming to America, the Jewish Impact and the Jewish Response. We had some unique programming, the American Jewish Deli, a history, because food is so important to the Jewish way of life all over the world. And that was held in New York City at the Park East Synagogue. And two other important events to highlight were the Jewish American Heritage Month Film Festival, which was held right here in Washington, D.C. in the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library Auditorium. And lastly, the program held in Margate, New Jersey by the Board of Jewish Education, highlighting the contributions of Jewish women in America. And as a Jewish woman in America, I am really proud to have been a part of introducing this resolution, ensuring that ultimately we were able to honor the contributions of American Jews to our history, but also to make sure that we can help all Americans make it a priority that we promote tolerance, that we reduce anti-Semitism, reduce bigotry, and hopefully, Mr. Speaker, reach out to non-Jews across this country and help them learn a little bit more about a culture that they may be unfamiliar with, about a tradition and a history that might be a little bit foreign to them, so that we can all come together as we're so committed to do in America, as one people, standing for freedom, standing for tolerance, and standing for justice. Thank you so much. I yield back the balance of our time.
The gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and to the staff who's been here late tonight, I won't take the full hour. I'll take about 30 minutes. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time I've been on the floor of the House to speak about the V-22 Osprey crash that took place in Arizona in 2000. The crash that claimed the lives of 19 Marines, Mr. Speaker. The pilots of the Osprey, Major Brooks Gruber and Lieutenant Colonel John Brow, have been blamed for the accident by the media. The reason I'm standing here 12 years later is that the Marine Corps has not supported the finding of their own accident investigation for 12 years. The fact is, the official report, known as the Jagman Report, conducted by the United States Marine Corps, clearly states that the pilots were not at fault. On page 77 of the Jagman, it says, and I quote, "During this investigation, we found nothing that we would characterize as negligence, deliberate pilot error, or maintenance material failure." After 12 years, the Jagman, which has not been, nor do we want to try to change that report that I just read, Mr. Speaker, but we're asking the United States Marine Corps to make the change that is necessary, because the press release that came out after the crash on April the 8th of 2000, the United States Marine Corps claimed in their own press release, and I quote, "The pilot's drive to accomplish the mission appears to be the fatal factor." Mr. Speaker, the Osprey, for those that might not be familiar, and I will hold up, is the helicopter that goes from a helicopter mode into an airplane mode. And I'm holding it, Mr. Speaker, so that those that are watching might be able to see it. At the time of this crash, the V-22 was still an experimental plane. And what needed to be asked by the United States Marine Corps was that Bell Boeing do more testing, and more testing would have probably meant that they would have understood an issue that's called vortex ring state, VRS. It is well known in most helicopters, but in the Osprey that has the twin engines, they did not know how the vortex ring state would impact one engine or the other engine. And that's what caused this tragic accident in April of 2000. Again, there were 19 Marines were killed and burned to death. Mr. Speaker, in this 10-year journey that I have been on to clear the names of the 2 Marine pilots, the one on my immediate left is Colonel John Brow. His lovely wife, Trish, and their 2 children, Matthew and Michael, live in California, Maryland. The other young Marine beside Colonel Brow's photograph is the co-pilot, whose name is Major Brooks Gruber. Major Gruber's wife, Connie, lives in my district. She's the one that brought this to my attention. In these 10 years, in addition to the Jagman report that I just quoted that says that these pilots were not at fault, I've reached out to so many people that is unbelievable, including the former Assistant Secretary of Defense, Phil Cole. And I would like to read his comment, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Major Gruber should not be blamed for an accident caused by loss of lift due to the aircraft entering vortex ring state. It was a phenomenon which no one in the Marine Corps adequately understood in relation to the Osprey at the time of the accident." Phil Cole further stated, and I read, "Not only did the Marine Corps not understanding Osprey performance under VRS, the root cause of the accident, but neither did the contractor nor the Marine Corps had tested the aircraft near VRS conditions, something which, following the accident, it later took the Marine Corps years to accomplish. Surely Major Gruber cannot be blamed for something that the Marine Corps itself did not grasp until years after his death." And, Mr. Speaker, I further quote Phil Cole, "Considering that it was ignorance on the part of the Marine Corps that caused the April 2000 accident, the Marine Corps should make it clear to Gruber's family, with no ifs or buts, that Gruber was not responsible for the accident. I don't suppose the Marine Corps ever apologizes, but considering that the accident was their fault and not Major Gruber's fault, an apology to the family would be in order also." Mr. Speaker, I don't really like reading that because I have such great respect for the Marine Corps, but I must say today on the floor that I'm very disappointed in the Marine Corps. Because before I finish in just a few minutes, you're going to understand why I'm disappointed. Because the 2 wives have asked for something very simple, and I will explain that before I close. Another one of the experts who has joined us, former advisor to the Secretary of Defense, Rex Rivolo, stated, and I quote, "The failure of the manufacturer of Bell Boeing and the Navy to characterize the slow speed, high rate of descent handling qualities of the V-22 through flight testing to describe them for the aircrew in the NATOPS and to provide an adequate warning system were the cause of the mishap, not the aircraft crew. With the passing of 10 years and the failure of the aircraft now secure, the future of the aircraft now secure, I sincerely hope that the names of Lieutenant Colonel Brow and Major Gruber can now be exonerated and clear for posterity. I strongly support any and all measures to this end and request that this letter be included in any official record regarding the cause of the M22 mishap in Marana, Arizona on April the 8th, or any resolution attempting to clear the names of Lieutenant Colonel John Brow and Major Brooks Gruber. Mr. Speaker, so many people in this 10-year effort have joined. It's just unbelievable. I just read from two of those individuals who are well known in the defense industry. Another person who was in the air in the 3rd Osprey, Lieutenant Colonel James Schaefer, a dear friend of Brow and Gruber's, who was in the air with them that night in a separate plane, agrees with me and has gone above and beyond in his quest to clear his friends' names. I want to thank Lieutenant Colonel James Schaefer for stepping out. He's a great Marine. He loves the Marine Corps, but he knows that these two gentlemen should never be seen as being at fault. Mr. Speaker, I've gotten to know the two attorneys who defended the families. Jim Furman in Texas was the attorney for John Brow and Brooks Gruber's families. In New York, the attorney was Brian Alexander, who he and his associate defended the 17 Marines and their families who were killed in the back of the plane. Both these attorneys, Mr. Speaker, have written to the Commandant of the Marine Corps and made it perfectly clear that the lawsuits are all settled and nothing should the Marine Corps decide to give the two wives what I'm going to describe in just a few minutes, a letter stating clearly that their husbands, Colonel John Brow and Major Brooks Gruber, should not be seen at fault. They have stated in writing, and I have copies, Mr. Speaker, that there will be no lawsuits. The lawsuits are over. This is what Connie Gruber wrote me back in 2002. I want to read part of this for the record. I contact you in hopes that leaders of integrity, free of bias, would have both the intelligence and the courage it takes to decide the facts for themselves. If you do that, you will agree the human factor / pilot error findings should not stand as it is in the military history. Again, I respectfully ask for your support. Please do not simply pass this matter along to General Jones without offering the support my husband and his comrades deserve. Please remember, these 19 Marines can no longer speak for themselves. I certainly am not afraid to speak for them, and I believe somebody has to, even though it is easier put to rest and forgotten. Please join me in doing the right thing by taking the time to address this important issue. Over the years, I have received some help from the United States Marine Corps, but the Commandant is the person now, Mr. Speaker, that could give the wives what they're looking for. And that is just a simple letter that I'm going to read for the record. On July the 27th of 2000, the United States Marine Corps issued a press release about the April 8, 2000 MV-22 Osprey crash that killed 19 Marines near Marana, Arizona. In that press release, the United States Marine Corps cited human factors as a cause of the accident. Furthermore, the release included a statement saying the pilot's drive to accomplish that mission appears to have been the fatal factor. Since that press release, there has been a mistaken perception in the news media and written history that the cause of the accident was pilot error. That perception dishonors the pilots who died that night, Lieutenant Colonel John Brow and Major Brooks Gruber. I would like to set the record straight on this matter. The July 27, 2000 press release unfairly placed the blame for the accident at the pilot's feet. It is morally wrong to place the blame for that accident on John Brow and Brooks Gruber. The mishap was not a result of pilot error, but was the result of a perfect storm of circumstances. Any accident is a result of a multitude of factors. The primary causal factors of this accident were: 1, insufficient developmental research and flight testing. 2, no knowledge of the possible sudden onset of an asymmetrical flight condition and loss of control during vortex ring state. 3rd, inadequate MV-22 NATOPS VRS discussion, warnings, and procedures. No VRS avoidance training. Further states what we're asking the Commandant to issue. I just read a little bit, part of it. Now I want to finish, Mr. Speaker. With no knowledge, training, or warning concerning the possible consequences of VRS, John Brown and Brooks Gruber were essentially on their own in uncharted territory. The official investigation into this mishap explicitly states, and I quote, "During this investigation, we found nothing that we would characterize as negligence, deliberate pilot error, or maintenance/material failure." I wholeheartedly agree with the investigation. Any publication that is contrary to the official Marine Corps investigation and reflects the mishap was a result of pilot error should be corrected and recanted. Lieutenant Colonel John Brown and Major Brooks Gruber were aviation pioneers in the truest sense. The ultimate sacrifice made by all 19 Marines aboard the aircraft that night led to a critical advancement in MV-22 safety and capability and overall readiness of the United States Marine Corps. It is because of their sacrifice that the MV-22 is successfully carrying Marines in and out of combat today. Mr. Speaker, the letter I just read has been approved by the Marines who wrote the investigation, Colonel Mike Morgan, Colonel Ron Radish, and Major Phil Stackhouse, and has been approved by the widows, Connie Gruber down in Jacksonville and her daughter Brooks, and Trish Brow in California, Maryland, and her 2 sons, Michael and Matthew. The letter does not go against any word in the investigation. The Commandant should send these letters to the 2 wives. And Mr. Speaker, I have said to the Commandant a few months ago, "Sir, if you would call a press conference at Marine Headquarters in Washington, D.C., and you would invite the families of John Brown and Brooks Gruber, you would present the 2 wives, Connie and Trish, on your stationery exactly, Mr. Speaker, what I just read. This would bring a tragedy to a close. I'm going to continue to beat this drum, Mr. Speaker, for as long as I can, because the dead cannot speak for themselves. And if we, the living, do not speak for the dead and tell the truth, how can you ever correct a mistake if we don't take this upon ourselves?" Mr. Speaker, the last point before I close, I want to read this. This is from the attorney Brian Young. These 2 attorneys went to an administrative judge, and the lawyers for Bill Bowen were there, and they made this point. On April the 8th of 2000, there was no emergency procedure or recovery technique for asymmetrical VRS. The pilot's manual lacked adequate content, accuracy, and clarity because of incomplete development testing that was insufficient, explanatory or emphatic tests to warn pilots of the hazard of operating in this area. The pilot manual was plagued with inaccuracies that degraded flight operations and contained performance charts provided by the developers which did not reflect actual conditions. Mr. Speaker, Bill Bowen, after the lawsuit, had the experimental pilot named Tom McDonald spent 700 hours in the air trying to figure out how you respond to vortex ring state. He figured it out. He won the Kinchlow Award, which is only given to 1 experimental pilot in this country per year, because he solved the problem of vortex ring state, VRS, what pilots are supposed to do when they hit that VRS state. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Commandant of the Marine Corps, who I have great respect for, will do what is right for John Brown, Brooks Gruber, and actually the 17 Marines in the back of the plane that crashed, and issue the letter that I just read for the record to the two wives, do it in a public setting, bring the press in, and say that the Marine Corps does not forget its dead. It is so simple, Mr. Speaker, that you will never believe how many people have said to me in this 10-year journey, why doesn't the Marine Corps do it? I can't explain it. The lawsuits are over. The plane is safe. The D-22 is safe. Nobody's trying to take it out of the program. But for the families of John Brown, Brooks Gruber, this is the right thing to do. And in my humble opinion, that the Marine Corps is so well respected and thought of in this nation that they would be even revered more if they would say to Colonel John Brown, to Major Brooks Gruber and your families, you did your job. You did it to the best of your ability. We regret that you were not prepared, but it was not your fault that you were not prepared. It was a rush to get this thing completed by Bill Bowen and the United States Marine Corps. With that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the staff for staying later tonight. I knew that I could convey my heart in about 25 minutes. And, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to be on the floor from time to time with the photographs of these two young Marine officers. I wish I had the 17 that were in the back of the plane, but I don't. With that, Mr. Speaker, as I always do when I think about our troops over in Afghanistan and Iraq, I close by asking God to please bless the families of our men and women in uniform. I ask God to please bless those who have given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I want to ask God tonight to please bless this effort to clear the names of John Brown and Brooks Gruber. And I ask God to please bless the House and Senate that we will do what is right in the eyes of God for His people in America. I ask God to please bless Mr. Obama that he would do what is right in the eyes of God for the American people. And 3 times I will ask, God please, God please, God please continue to bless America. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the balance of my time. And if you want me to make a motion, I'll make a motion.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Speaker, I make a motion that the House do now adjourn.
The question is, on the motion to adjourn, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.
So that wraps up today's work in the U.S. House.